2021 season. So now getting into my second topic, which that's going to be looking at the past performance for the men's Husky basketball team. There has been 1 week in the conference play for the Huskies where they didn't lose all the games. That was the 1 week they traveled to the mountain schools where they beat Colorado and Utah. Now, this week was more of all the other weeks where they lost both games. The Huskies traveled down south to the state beneath us, and they came back up north with no wins and 2 losses. So they first traveled to play Oregon State, and that was last Thursday. And really, that whole game was just a blowout. UW didn't really seem in it for the majority of the game. They ended up losing 71-91, and their defense was non-existent, and their offense was back to its old ways that it had been playing 3-4 weeks ago, where it's only shooting 25% from behind the arc. So on the last week's show, the key to this game, I said, was going to be UW having to stop Oregon State senior guard Ethan Thompson on offense. So let's look and see how he did. So first of all, Thompson is averaging 16 points, 3.5 rebounds, 4 assists per game, shooting 41%. Now, in the game against UW, he hit his average for points spot on, scoring 16 points. He added 2 rebounds, 7 assists, shot 50%, and had 3 steals. The Huskies couldn't stop Thompson, and they couldn't beat him on the offensive end. Green at the guard spot had his worst game in a while. Now, Green is mighty undersized against Thompson, with Thompson being 6'5" and Green only being 6 feet tall, and that clearly affected Green, it appeared. It was hard for him to get passes past Thompson. And another thing that affected Green was that he got into early foul trouble, and he ended up never being able to find his offense. So Green really got into foul trouble from the tip. On Oregon State's first offensive possession, Green had a foul called on him, and then 4 or 5 minutes later, with 15 minutes to go in the first half, he had a second foul called on him and ended up being subbed out of the game. So he couldn't really get any sort of rhythm in his game to start off. And he ended up finishing the day shooting 1 for 7, 4 turnovers, only 2 assists and 2 points. So that kind of stalled out Green with that foul trouble to start off and the pressure and defense that Thompson applied to him. Now, really looking at other Oregon State players besides Thompson who played great, really it's just the entire starting 5 for Oregon State was unstoppable. The Huskies couldn't do anything against them. The lowest point total on the starting 5 for Oregon State was 14 points. Oregon State's starting 5 combined for 81 of the 91 points that they scored. The starting 5 shot 55% from the field, while the whole team wasn't far behind them, shooting 49% and 46% from 3. So really, the Huskies couldn't do anything on the defensive end or the offensive end of this game. And that's really disappointing to me, as quite frankly, I talked about this as being one of the few remaining games that I thought the Huskies could at least be competitive in. I thought that they might be able to pull off the win. Oregon State doesn't have the best record in the Pac-12. They're not one of the top teams in the Pac-12 like a lot of these teams. The Huskies finished last week against Oregon, one of the top teams, and both games this week are against some of the top teams in the Pac-12. So this was one of the more winnable games that UW had left on their schedule. And so losing this game and just coming out and playing the way they did play, it disappoints me. Now, even with how poorly the Huskies played and how poorly they shot, they still stayed in the game for the first 15 minutes of the game. Now, for the other 25 minutes of the game, they weren't in it at all. They were really blown out. But for the first 15 minutes, By 5 minutes remaining in the first half, the Huskies were only down 3. Now, of course, they couldn't keep it this close at all or really for any longer, as by half they were down 12, and the deficit never really got any closer than 12. So the Huskies really have to play hard for a full 40 minutes in all their games or in each game if they want to be competitive. Now, even if they play hard for the full 40 minutes, there's no guarantee that they can even win the game, as they've played hard for majority of games, but they still end up losing in the end. Now, against Oregon, UW played much better than against how they played Oregon State. Had UW played like they played against Oregon State, then I think they could have had a shot at beating the Beavers. Against Oregon, UW shot 51% from the field and 47% from deep, compared to the 25% from three they shot against OSU. Now, the shooting percentage numbers against Oregon were very similar to Oregon's numbers against UW. Oregon shot 49% from the field compared to UW's 51%, and 48% from deep compared to UW's 47%. However, even with this close shooting percentage, the Huskies still ended up losing by 12 points, and quite frankly, it could have been a lot worse had Green not caught fire towards the end of the second half. Green really got hot in the second half as he scored 21 of his 23 points in the fourth quarter. The Huskies were down 20 with 7 minutes to go in the game, and Green went on a nice run, where at one point I believe he scored about 9 straight points for the Huskies. So overall, Green had a great second half, but this kind of leads to what my take on this game was in the storyline. Hot shooting bursts followed by ice cold shooting bursts, or the other way around, as it is for Green. Because no matter how great you look at Green's stat lines at 23 points, in the first half he only managed to score 2 points. You're not going to win a game when your best player is scoring 2 points and a half, no matter how great he plays in the second half. Another piece of this hot then cold is how the Huskies just started the game. They got out to an 18 to 14 point lead, but then they followed up that hot start with ice cold shooting. They went 1 for 8 on their next shots, and next thing you know, the Huskies aren't winning anymore. Really, the last time the Huskies saw a single point differential was with 18 seconds left in the first half when Sahonis made a layup, and it put them down only 8 points. Now, they couldn't even keep that differential going in the half, as they allowed Oregon to get a nice 3-point shot, which they made, so they go into the half down 11. Something else that I want to point out is something that I pointed out in an episode a few times ago, and that's just Mike Hopkins' rotation. And it doesn't seem like Hopkins has an ideal rotation that he wants to use each game. It's really whatever he feels, I guess. And these 2 games this week are perfect examples of this. Against OSU, they ran a 9-man rotation. Jerron Brooks started as Hamir Wright came off the bench recovering from his thumb injury. Yet Jerron Brooks only got 8 minutes starting. Then you have Riley Sorn coming off the bench. He got 18 minutes of playing time. Nate Pryor got 1 minute. Eric Stevenson started as usual, and he played for 27 minutes. Now I'm going to compare that against their next game last week, which was against Oregon. And Jerron Brooks, who started against OSU, didn't touch the court against Oregon. Stevenson against Oregon played 7 less minutes. Sorn played 8 less minutes, and really, he seemed to be just subbed in for defense for 1 play and then subbed out, even though he was making an impact on the offensive end, shooting 3 for 3. Then Nate Pryor went from playing 1 minute against OSU to playing 12 minutes against Oregon. So really, just Hopkins' rotation has confused me for this whole year. I don't quite understand why Hopkins does this. Consistent roles and consistent minutes can help these players get in a better rhythm. Now, I can't wait to see these games this week. as I'm sure those minutes will be just as inconsistent as they've been for the rest or for the last part of the season. Now, moving on to the final topic.